Hello and welcome back everyone to the London Webfest Q&A sessions. For those of you who don't know, I am Saul Marin. I'm the festival director here for the London Webfest. Now, as always, with our Q&As, we're going to be talking to some of the best talent on the festival circuit right now. This time round, we've invited our producers from our Q2 official selection. Now, don't forget, as always, we want to hear from you as well. You can pose your questions live to our panel just by adding them to the chat. So, as always, before we begin, I think it's always best to take a closer look at the people's work before we get to meet them in person. Thanks so much.
Granddad!
Hi. Oh, Beck? Is that it?
No, Sandra.
Oh.
For the armchair?
Oh, right. Damien! Babe? That Beck lady's here for the armchair?
Sandra.
Oh. Sorry. Sandra, right. This is the, Sandra for the armchair.
Babe, not my chair.
We've already talked about this. There's not going to be any room.
Babe, you know it's these items that make you attracted to me. I think it's just your way of slowly erasing me from your life.
Okay, just get the fucking armchair! Can you...
She's yelling at me.
I like your dynamic.
What, yelling at each other?
Borderline abusive.
Yeah, it seems really fun.
Okay, well, send your energy out into the world and you'll get it. Hi, you must be Sam, the new flatmate.
Oh, you must be Sandra, the lesbian?
I am. That's not what I said.
That is literally what you said. You said my lesbian housemate Sandra is moving in with the girlfriend that she barely knows.
I do know her.
Well, you might want to tell her that.
Fantastic stuff. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
How is everyone doing with sound? I realised we had a few issues before we came in. To Lula, put a thumbs up if you can hear us. Or if she can't hear us, she's never going to be able to. Okay. So we may have lost Tallulah already, but if I send her out and come back in again, we will get going. Thank you so much for bringing your work to the festival for Q2. It has been, as always, an arduous task trying to find our winners, and I think Campbell Beaton, our guest judge, has his work cut out for him. If we start off with going around the group, Angus, we'll start with you. Tell us a bit about Blue, the project that you brought to the festival.
So Blue was actually something that's quite close to my heart. It was an idea that we had come up with at ProMaker, a group of us, in terms of telling a story about a small girl who was interested in science, technology, space, and all that. But we actually wanted to not just tell a story, we wanted to create it in a way that had never been done before. So we actually rendered it entirely in the Unreal game engine, and it was all built entirely in the cloud. So all of our people working on the project were all over the world working together. I don't know if everyone else is hearing this massive echo, but I can definitely hear it.
It sounds all right from where I am, so hopefully for the viewers at home, you'll be all right. Apologise for this brain jamming that's going on. I think we've got some audio issues with our guests. Tobias, tell us a little bit about your work that you brought to London Web Fest.
Okay, Discontent is an anthology series about a bunch of millennials that are fumbling their way through love and the challenges of modern life, and each episode focuses on a different character with a different addiction to the internet. Sam Rogers, the creator, is a very prolific short filmmaker. We've known each other for a long time, went through film school together. And he started making this web series or writing this web series, and I jumped on as a producer because I thought I'm a big fan of his work. And, sorry, I'm hearing myself echoing in my ears, and it's really
throwing you off. There's nothing worse than that kind of like brain jam.
But anyway, so huge fan of his work, and I thought the series was. There's a lot of interesting things that Sam likes to explore, and a lot of merit in this series. So. That's how that all kind of came about. We made it over about. It's been in the works for a while, especially the pandemic. It sort of threw us out of production for a while, but shooting it over the course of about 2 years. Each different kind of episode.
It's amazing how much you kind of, I think people forget, because of everything that's happened, what a normal production time would be has suddenly just been expanded, and you're trying to get as much as you can each time there's a gap, each time there's a window. Some people lucked out, some productions lucked out, and managed to have their filming schedules exactly in a perfect time. But for I think a lot of filmmakers, the pandemic has stretched both production time and budget. Tallulah, if you can hear us, tell us about Coexisting.
Coexisting is I've got that sound thing as well. Coexisting is a TV pilot about two people slightly awkward individuals who find themselves in a position where they need someone new to live with. And I pitched it to a friend of mine who's a very, very talented actor and writer. And we co-wrote it and co-produced it together. We wanted to do it in such a way that it could both be a TV pilot that we could then take to pitch with the rest of the season in prose. But we also wanted to do it in such a way that the pilot itself could be a web series. So each kind of scene within the pilot is like a mini episode, if you like, which was an interesting way of writing it. But yeah, that's it.
Fantastic.
I've lost all of you guys.
I found out that I am the culprit because as soon as I muted my mic, Angus was like, "Yeah, sounds great," and I was like, "Oh, wow," which is great because it means that no one at home wants to hear me speak anymore. That they're here to listen to you guys. So I apologise for the echo as I'm speaking. It's quite an interesting task to try and make something, especially in this day and age, where web series and webisodes, the meaning of it is constantly changing. So to be able to have a product, to be able to have a project that is both a standalone piece, can be part of a larger web series, but also something that can be pitched as well, is no mean feat. I will quickly mute myself in a second when I say, Tom, tell us about When the Clapping Stops.
When the Clapping Stops is about a care worker in the UK who has to balance his care for his main patient, but also care for his grandfather. The writer, Sam Briggs, is also a care worker. So it was written out of very, very personal experience for him and the stresses that he felt affect him. And it was taken on by the director, Cameron Perry. And yeah, it was a really nice project to take on. Obviously, coming out of the pandemic, the title suggests, you know, a lot of the UK public would stand outside their doors and clap for the NHS, but the idea is that when everything calms down, there's still these people on the front line who are still breaking their backs and struggling to basically survive. And so, yeah, it was a really, really interesting project to take part of.
It's, I mean, it is a very powerful title. The reason all of you are here is because something that you have brought to the festival has affected either myself or Campbell in some way. You know, there's been something that's moved us or intrigued us, or kind of such different varied work. When the clapping stops is something that was near and dear to my heart. I've had family who worked in social work and social care offices, and there was something that hit a note with me. It was, as the title suggests, something quite powerful. Thank you so much for sharing about the projects. It's nice to see such a diverse level of producers here. Can you describe your journey to how did you get to be a producer? It's not always the most obvious direct line when it comes to filmmaking. Whoever wants to go first.
I can jump in first. I've had quite a varied career in the past. Started off as a graphic designer. That was my initial kind of love, and then after that became an animator, 3D animator, and then after that became a compositor. So it really kind of was on the artistic kind of creative side, and then from there went on to become directed quite a lot of content, and then set up a company a couple of years ago, which really is a collaboration, and it's a collection of a lot of different artists, producers, directors, and that. And I just felt like putting on the producer hat was something that was pretty good. I love seeing other people really succeed and do well, and I think there's a lot of really powerful directors and storytellers there, and I could just see from being in the support role, actually helping content get made was something that I'd never really done before, and was really excited about it in order to do that with Blue.
I think I had a fairly sorry, the echo's gone now. Like I've had a similar kind of trajectory to Angus. Like not really, I wasn't a graphic designer, but sort of started a company a couple of years ago, or not, it was like 5 years ago, not a couple. And it was, the idea was that it'd be a collective of filmmakers, and I'd start making work under the name Cool Studio, like the umbrella of Cool. But yeah, like I guess as far as the journey goes, I've always wanted to make films and tell stories, like ever since I was a teenager, and went through film school, did the kind of classic kind of trajectory, and I've done all kinds of things in the industry, like started editing, I was working for production houses, editing commercials and all that kind of stuff, and directing short films on the side, and then eventually started making a feature-length documentary, and that's when I started the company. But what sort of turned me to producing was, I guess that film took about 3 years to make. It was quite intense and quite emotionally involved. And I was like, I don't think I really want to direct anything right now. But I was surrounded by all these fabulous filmmakers in our studio, and it sort of became like there was some skills lacking as far as like we're all very self-sufficient, but as far as integrating ourselves into the wider industry, I started trying to learn how to actually place our work and find markets, which I got quite interested in. So it sort of just became a little bit out of necessity and just a passion for wanting to tell more stories. I was like, how can I tell more stories? I'm like, well, maybe I could just develop things with all these talented people that are around me, and rather than trying to write and direct my own work constantly, which I find quite mentally and just exhausting. And producing is as well, but it's in a different kind of way, I guess. So yeah, I guess, and yeah, from there I started picking up projects. I produced one web series with Kathleen called Sex and Death, which I kind of did a similar thing to Discontent. We released it in the web series festival circuit, and that did quite well. And I've been working and developing this with Sam Rogers for a number of years. And this one's in a bit of a slower process, and being an anthology, totally different. And looking to do some more soon.
Fantastic. It's funny you said when you're talking about gathering, other people. I always find that with producing, which is, obviously there's delegation involved, but if the people you're delegating to are incredibly talented and you've just surrounded yourself with the right people, it's just made that much easier. Having a great team behind you is worth more than gold. Tallulah, what about yourself?
I actually started in acting, and then, as is often the way, being frustrated with lack of work and waiting for the phone to ring, decided to make my own stuff. So dabbled in kind of writing and directing first, but actually was still very much acting was my priority. Until a few years ago. Well, actually, I've really got into directing. I love it. I was very fortunate to be able to direct a play 3 years ago. And one of the reasons I directed it is because the writer co-produced it with me. And then I realized actually that that's kind of what I want to do. So I've kind of fallen into producing actually as a way to be able to direct the stuff I want to direct. So I feel very underqualified being in this roundtable with the rest of you more seasoned producers, but that's how I ended up here.
I mean, I think you sell yourself short, because producing by itself is incredibly hard, but also directing at the same time, there's so many different hats that you're wearing. Like I know too well how difficult that can be. So you're more than welcome here and more than deserved here. Tom, finally yourself.
I kind of, I went to film school, and it's one of those. It was only a master's. It was only for a year, so the idea is that they just throw you in at everything and just see what sticks. So I mean, if you go onto my IMDb page, it's just littered with random roles basically. So there was, I think my top credit is sound, still in the sound department. So did just sort of went around all the different departments, did sound, did camera, did lighting, did a bit of editing. My main love is still directing, but at the end of the course, I remember I was brought aside by one of my good friends, Omar, and he said, you've had a go at everything. You must kind of know how everything works. So I gave it a crack, and I felt that because, again, I'd sort of dabbled in everything. I had a good understanding of how a set should be well run, and also the bits and pieces that need to come together to make a film. And I ended up producing a few student films, and then sort of just did a bit of freelance work on Mandy, which is where I found When the Clapping Stops. And it's I've really enjoyed it. There's something incredibly satisfying about seeing something just come together. And as you've all sort of said, the greatest value is having people around you that you can just call upon. They're worth their weight in gold, really. And the more projects you do, the more mistakes you make and the more things you learn, but also the more people that you meet and that you can just add to your collection of people that you can just bring together and to make stuff. And I think passion is still in directing, of course, though the problem now is that whenever I would direct something, I have to really take the producer hat off, or else I'm going to start looking around at the set and see how everyone's doing and if everyone's okay and if everything's arriving on time. But it's also a bit of a blessing to have produced and then to do your own stuff, because then you can be part of the production process as well and help that sort of tick along as well, which is great.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a blessing and a curse to have gone through all the different roles. And again, as I say, with the trajectory of a lot of producers, they have done a whole, the whole entourage of work that there is on set. But taking that cap off and just having the single role of director when you're kind of like, hey, is that going on all right over there? We were talking about delegating earlier on, which I, from a personal note, point of view, like find quite hard. One from, what feeling like, especially with lower budget work, when you feel like you have to do everything, but also when you move on to having an increased budget, to having an increased production time, how hard do you find it delegating, and what would your tips be, I suppose, when delegating to the people around you?
It is difficult. I think delegating is it is a skill as well, actually, when you think about it. Like I find with the smaller or lower budget productions, or when you're trying to get a project off the ground, like you tend to sort of have to do everything yourself by necessity in some ways, because you do want inadvertently, like on some of the work that we've been making in the past, because we're all sort of film school trained, kind of like Tom was, like we did get background in all kinds of different roles. So I think like even the directors I work with some of them are quite hands-on in the producing side of things as well. Like, they might have certain crew that they like to work with, and like, have a really good understanding of how set runs and how we want to schedule things, and which I think is a call sign of a good director as well. But yeah, delegating is tricky on a lower budget, because you kind of can't unless someone's really passionate about your project. Like, it's because you need to be able to rely on them. So unless they're the head of department, like your DOP or a director, or possibly a writer or an actor or something, it's hard to kind of delegate in the smaller roles. I have, like, I don't want to sound like I'm gloating, but like, I'm working on a feature film at the moment. I'm signed on as a co-production with a larger company, and it took me a while to get into the headspace. It's like, oh, I can actually ask for help with some help from them, like, because they've got quite good resources. And I remember the first time I didn't have to write just for an application. I didn't have to write a synopsis, because I had a script editor there that was just like, yeah, I'll do that. I'm like, oh, I don't have to do that. It was quite an amazing feeling. So, like, I think it just comes with, maybe as your projects grow, and but I think that there's also, like, you need to learn to trust people and trusting their talent. Like, they might have a slightly different way of thinking or a different way of doing things, but kind of sometimes letting go and knowing that it's going to get done in one way, shape, or form is also kind of freeing as well.
Yeah, I must admit, Tobias, it's interesting kind of just letting go, because, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and it's a problem that I've got, but I've realized that in order to make content, you kind of need a lot of people in order to do it. And if you're involved in absolutely every part of it, it just grinds to a halt. So what you need to do is you need to assemble the best possible group of people that you can and trust them. I think that's the thing, is really kind of imparting kind of your trust in them. And they might not do it exactly as you would do it, but they might find their own way of getting there. But at the end of the day, I think it's the only way that you actually make things of scale is by delegating and trusting, really. I think, it's also echoing what you were saying in terms of the lower the budget, the more hats you have to wear. I'm also used to having directed stuff as well, but it's really nice when you can get to a scale when you can actually step back a little bit and everyone has a little bit more specialized role, is that the quality just goes up. And I think that's what I've realized, is if people are able to focus in on what they're good at and they bring their best game to the party, then the overall quality of the piece kind of goes up. And I think that's one of the amazing things about delegation, is that trusting and then watching it all kind of come together is ideally how this is all supposed to work.
Fantastic. Tallulah, what about yourself?
Yeah, again, just echo what Angus and Tobias have said. If you're lucky enough to be able to kind of select all your cast and crew yourself, then definitely that's the key, is to trust them and just let them get on with it and know that they're good at what they're doing. I've never been in a position where I've had to delegate, because as Tobias was saying earlier, I've had to kind of put loads of hats on and do it all. But I imagine it would be lovely to be able to just focus on your main job, because as you touched on earlier, it's not easy kind of having multiple hats and monitoring your own performance while also kind of visualizing the whole piece and being aware of what everyone else is doing. It must be very nice to kind of just focus on one job at a time.
And Tom, finally yourself. I'm trying to keep myself as much out of this so the echo goes, so just one line and I'm gone. Tom.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to echo what everyone else said, trust is super, super important. And also just to remind yourself, like, delegation is there for a reason. It makes things go quicker and it gets things done more efficiently when it works well. And is when you kind of when you start seeing it in action and it works properly, it's like a sigh of relief. You're like, oh, thank God, like it's actually working. And but it does make life a lot easier, and it's there for a reason. I mean, still to this day though, it's still really hard to do. I mean, on when the clapping stops, like our spark pulled out at the last minute, so I had to spark for 2 days just because there was no one else. But again, it's the thing, like, you just, you know, it's hard to sort of take yourself away from it, especially when you've put so much time and passion into it. It's very hard to kind of step back and let other people and do it. And also, I think with a lot of us, it's not just about the project, but like there's a lot of care that goes into your crew as well. And there's just a lot, like, you just want to make sure they're happy and what can you do to help them. And but yeah, again, trust is the number one thing, I would say. Yeah.
There's a little Sorry.
Can I just say one more thing? Just like the way we sort of structure things, or we're trying to structure our productions here, like back home in Australia. I guess, like, I mean, by the nature of like short form and web series, like a lot of people often think of it as a, you know, career progression thing, or, you know, like there's very valid careers happening in short form. I'm not saying there isn't, like, but, you know, it's you're often trying to emulate or like use it as a stepping stone to maybe a feature project or a television project or something. Like we're often, like, I think maybe coming from film school as well, like we try and emulate a larger production as much as we can when we're talking about roles. You know, like we'll try and have that sort of you know, the film set hierarchy and like stick to those roles as much as we can. But, you know, as we're all saying, like, because of the nature of the projects they are, you often have to wear, you know, multiple different hats rather than just the one. I think that's the difference between the kind of, you know, independent sort of web series stuff and, say, working on a feature film or a fully funded television series from a network. And just quickly, is a spark is that someone in lighting, Tom? Because I love that as a term. I want to bring that up.
Yeah, it's just the little term for the like electricians. So below the best boy, it's just the general electricians. Yeah. So we had our gaffer
saying that.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
Spark.
Love it. All right, anyway, sorry, I digress.
Yeah, there's a sexy term for, you know, for a matter of fact job. I mean, there's a little bit of pride to have about being able to step into any role, you know, at any given point. The fact that, you know, your spark pulls out, and you're like, well, all right, well, over the course of years, you start to learn every little job so that, you know, you're always on hand. So we have a question. It's for Tom, but I actually feel like it can be applied to everyone. If there was one thing you would do differently in your role as producer, what would it be? If there's something, I don't know, maybe particularly on this project or on past projects, is there something that you've learnt from, or that you would want to change, or something you aspire to, you know, being a better producer in certain areas? It's quite open question, but it'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's one thing I would do differently. It's more of a little collection of things as the production goes on. So, like, no production is ever perfect, and if it is, it's probably cursed. Like, it's just unheard of. Like, they always have little things that go wrong, and I guess it's more about taking those little tiny things and just making sure you don't make those same mistakes twice. I think as well, especially with like the smaller and lower budget productions as well. I guess it's about finding, a good way to sort of micromanage those little issues that pop up on the day-to-day basis. And again, just in your head next time, trying to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes twice. Again, it's quite hard to think of like one particular thing, because in my mind I'm just reliving the days on set, and there's just like things go wrong, like the water didn't turn up, or there's maybe not enough prep time, or we should have gotten to the location a day earlier to make it like proper for the crew and everything. It's many different little things that I think you slowly get, not perfect over time, you just sort of get a little bit better and better with each production, really.
I do love that saying, though, that if it's going too right, then there must be something wrong. There's no such thing as, as a smooth ride. So something obviously horrendous is happening in the background. You're like, hey, the past few days have been really easy. Again, it's quite an open-ended question. Is anyone who has, maybe something that they'd like to aspire to in production as being a producer, or just anything that fits this question?
I've got something I've learned recently. Like, I think thinking about projects now, like, it's hard when you want to tell a story. You're very passionate about it, and you're trying not to think too much about the audience or the marketplace. You don't want it to kind of corrupt or skew your story in a way. But like, I think coming into projects now, which I hadn't done in the past, which I learned, which I personally find one of the pitfalls is, like, I'm thinking of the end result in pre-production a lot more now. Like, I used to just sort of read a script and be like, oh, wow, I love this is great. But now I'm thinking, okay, this is great, but where's it going to fit, or who's our audience, and where's it going to go? Like, who would be interested in this? Because if I think maybe as I'm getting a bit older as well, like the energy and the time, the time and life, and you want to, when you commit to something, you want to, often they take 2 or 3 years of your time. Really, like, you kind of feel like little mini relationships. You start dating this thing for ages, and hopefully it works out. So that's a weird analogy. Anyway, but so yeah, basically, like, I'm thinking a lot more about the end result before even signing on to a project now. And just, it's not so much like, I mean, it is in a way, like, it sounds harsh, but like, does this story need to be told, or is there a viable audience for this, for instance? That's kind of one thing that I kind of carry with me when I'm looking at scripts that are coming across my desk now, anyway, as a producer. Yeah.
Good stuff. Anybody else?
It's kind of similar to what Tobias was saying, actually, that, I mean, I guess whilst everyone wants to do stuff they're really passionate about, and ideally that is where you end up, I think certainly with the thing I'm planning on producing next, I'm trying to be more pragmatic. So I'm thinking, can I get this made, and can I get it made well? And also I'm thinking more now than I used to about festivals, because with Coexisting, when we first did it, I wasn't really thinking about festivals, because I was thinking, oh, we're going to try and do the web series, we're also going to do a pilot, and then when it came to submitting to festivals, I was like, oh, where does it really fit, what category? And so it's thinking about all the post-production stuff a bit more before you actually get involved and dive straight into a project, I think.
I love it. In my head, post-production is always a different budget, which is an awful way to make things. You're like, I have enough money to make it, and then we'll figure out how to finish it. It's always separated, which is, for anyone watching at home, is not a way to make stuff. Angus, what about yourself?
It's interesting. One of the things that I realize is that it's like practice. The more you do something, the better you get at it. And I think every project that you work on, there's little takeaways. And I think when I first started in the industry, I used to be absolutely terrified of every single project that came down. I was really worried, and oh God, this is so difficult. And you'd kind of really fret over every single thing. But as you get more experienced, and as you collaborate with more people, I think there's a there's a fluidity that happens. And I think that's the thing that I've realized, is that the more you make, the better you get. And I think that's the thing that I wish I'd almost started making earlier, because it's just you can feel it. You can feel every project. Your instincts just get a bit more fine-tuned. You've also been able to pick the right people, or being able to kind of, when someone says something really between the lines, you can really pull out exactly what they mean. So it's I think it's it's practice, really. It's like playing an instrument.
To contradict exactly what I said earlier, like just bouncing off Angus there, like in early stages of your career, like don't hold yourself back, because that is how you learn. Like what Angus was saying, like as soon as you start making, you pull little things here and there, and you quickly learn what doesn't work. So like if you are very passionate about a story, and you're not quite sure where your marketplace is, but you still want to make it anyway, like go for it. I'm not like, this is maybe for the sort of earlier career or younger filmmakers. I don't want to discourage anyone, or you have to think about your market first. But like that's just something I'm doing now, because I've been doing this for about 10 years, and that's where I'm at. But I definitely in early stages, just making things for the heck of it is kind of how you learn.
I think that's a great bit of advice for any filmmaker, which is, don't wait to make your perfect film the first time round, because it's you need to learn, you need to make mistakes and go, oh, I see that didn't work because of this, and then move on to the next project and learn from that. And especially in today, back when I started making things, trying to even get hold of a DSLR, that was a quality of camera was like, oh, you can make this beautiful stuff, but it wasn't readily available for anybody who was a student filmmaker or a new filmmaker. So now the fact that you can take your phone out anywhere and even learn through that, with editing, learn all the different parts of the business as much as you can, and hopefully get to meet people and crew that you'll take with you. We're talking momentarily earlier on about kind of budgets and timescales. How have you found, when it comes to keeping hold of that budget, of making the most of your money and making most of production time as well, both pre, post, and filming? Like, just talk us through what that's like as a producer, to be in charge of making sure that it all comes together, within the allotted amount you've got.
I could start. It's interesting. The project Blue started out as a pitch to Epic Games. Epic Games make a game called Fortnite, and they came up with this idea to create for something called an Epic Mega Grant, where you basically pitch an idea to them and then they'll fund it. So this sounded awesome. So we basically came up with the idea for Blue, and we're really passionate about it, and we pitched it. And then we got about half of what we were hoping to get, but they're like, that's okay. We can still make the film for that amount. So we're like, yeah, no problem. We'll just kind of cut people back, and we'll cut the time frame and things like that. So we started on the journey of making it, and about, I think, a third of the way through, we'd spent all of our money, and we only had about a third of the film. So we're like, well, what do we do now? So it was an interesting situation, because we were so invested in it, and we believed so much in what we were doing, that we actually went and started funding it ourselves from the company. So we probably went 3 times over budget. This is probably not what you want to hear, Saul, but we went 3 times over budget, and we spent 3 times as long making it. But we are so happy with the end result, and we're just so happy that we didn't try and shortchange it and really cut it off when we had run out of money. But I think one thing that it did teach us is that if your instincts are on budget on the beginning, you're generally pretty close to it. If your instincts on the ballpark and things like that, don't try and kid yourself that you can make something for half the price, because it sometimes ends up costing you a lot more. But I guess in order to make budgets go a long way, it's unusual. Our film Blue is the only animated piece of content here. And I think that it's interesting for us, because we were able to pull different people from around the world to actually work in it. All of our animators were in South Africa. Our director was in Los Angeles. Our technical team was in New York. And it was interesting kind of just kind of getting talent from around the world, exceptional talent, they were able to come together and actually, essentially make it, as it were. But yeah, a bit of a rambling answer, but
no, not at all. In fact, that fed into, we had a question from Laurie there, which was for you, which is yours is the, and you spelled it out perfectly. Yours is the only one that's not live action. And could you talk a bit about the production process? And you went right into it like a natural. It was fantastic. So, anybody else? What does it come to? You might be quite surprised though. That I like to hear the reality of it. I mean, especially I think for filmmakers as well, which is know that yes, you may have 5,000 to play with, but that may not necessarily be how much it costs to make. When it comes to the pandemic, you may think you can get it done in 3 months, and it may not be as drastic as the pandemic in any way, but that could take you 2 years. It's good to know for all filmmakers that the same problems arise for everybody, for be it producers or directors, or there's always hurdles. And I think, especially from my point of view, it's nice to hear from other filmmakers, ones you respect, that that it happens to the best of you. Anybody else? Talk us through your budgeting.
I've got a couple of things I could probably add. Budgets are funny, aren't they? But with the shorter form stuff and the stuff maybe that we're talking about, I feel like you can often make things maybe not so much for animation, but I feel like you can make things fairly cheaply if you've got the right people on board and people want to donate their time to your production. But I find often post production is often a little bit ignored because you just kind of want to get through the production process so badly. But not only that, but the distribution side. I remember making my first feature-length documentary, Now Sound. Made that for nothing. Sorry. So I'm just recovering from a cold. So we made that film for not much. I went out and bought a camera and just sort of shot this music documentary around Melbourne for about 2 or 3 years. Made it for peanuts. I'm like, wow, great. Probably spent 15 grand or something stupid, really nothing. And then came to post-production. I'm like, oh, it's starting to skyrocket. And then our distribution budget was triple that. And we eventually just ran out of money and I felt like we couldn't quite do our film justice because we didn't budget or account for how much money it takes just to kind of get this film into the cinema. The posters and blah, 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 all the marketing material, anything that, just getting people to see it. So I'd often, the short form stuff's a little bit different because there's lots of different platforms and, people can get really crafty with, platforms like TikTok now, you can have great reach and success on platforms like that with shorter form narrative. That's kind of a big discussion in Australia at the moment is creators creating work for that platform. Just kind of in a similar vein to the WebFest sort of stuff. I think WebFest kind of cross over in a lot of different platforms, which is interesting. So, I don't know. So sometimes TikTok, you may not need a giant budget if you're very crafty and you know who your audience are in that space. But I guess you just got to stay malleable. And it's really funny, thinking about how cheaply we made these kind of web series and budgeting this feature film at the moment. We're talking about millions, and I'm like, how did I make anything before this film? I just don't understand. But I guess when you start paying everybody and you got all the tax, all this stuff that you got to worry about, I guess that's where it all gets eaten up. But anyway, I don't know if I even answered any question there. I'll just stop talking now.
No, you did completely. This is my favourite thing, is just to pose questions and then just to hear personal views. It's amazing. You were talking about kind of WebFest stuff. It's such a broad spectrum, especially with the things that we see come through our doors, which is you can have heart-wrenching stories, you can have compelling, moving scripts, and the budget is next to nothing. But if you have a knack of being able to tell a story, it doesn't matter if there's budget. And then you have these epic, sci-fi adventures, and you have these, and I'm just like, where's the funding come from this? That it's great to see web series and short films that, especially in countries like Australia and Canada, there seems to be a lot more funding for short form content, and it's in the few years that we've been around, just that funding seems to be increasing. Less so in Britain, unfortunately. But it's really good to hear, everyone's perspective. Tallulah or Tom, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, our project was done through Kickstarter, and then it was successfully kickstarted through Cameron and Sam. But then the whole plan was to get to around about a 10K budget through external funding. So a lot of the pre-production was approaching people and trying to look for grants and look for, especially charities as well, because of the subject matter. Of course, because of the pandemic, we were hitting a lot of walls, particularly people who were willing to part with cash, being such a tough time. So in terms of budgeting, as the calendar sort of ticked down towards our final few weeks, the plan was to kind of make 3 different budget sheets for everyone, and that was just lowering, like lower, like what can you do with 7K, what can you do with 5K, what can you do with 3K, and it's all the same, it's just cheaper options. So it's just slowly getting cheaper and cheaper, and but it was nice to have, because it felt like we had parachutes, basically, because when you do make something on a shoestring budget, it can the fear can really take over, can really grip people, and it can really take over the whole creative process. Like, it's very hard for a director to actually focus on their job when they're afraid they're not even going to be able to make a film because of budget. So that's just my approach, was to just have as many different options as possible, and to just make sure everyone was aware that, okay, maybe we don't meet our target and maybe we have to go a little bit lower, but here's the complete option of how to do it. And you might not get exactly what you want, but you will get a film at the end of the day. I mean, saying that, we still went over budget, even though we had the sheets. We went over budget though on camera equipment, because our DOP Adric, he's such a talented guy. He wanted to film on film stock, but just couldn't do it for budget reasons. But Cameron and I had a discussion. We decided to sort of raise the budget for camera to give him what he wanted, and I think it's the one thing we're both like the most proud of. Like, the film just ended up looking fantastic. So you can do a lot of prep, but yeah, just be ready, because they're probably not gonna, you probably will go over budget, but it's nice to have them to keep everyone kind of calm, and to be reassured that there is backup plans and you can work your way through it.
It's quite it is, I mean, it's a beautiful looking film. I do love the fact that you had these contingencies from 10 to 7 to 3, but then if you're adding film stock into that, suddenly that's you've just doubled your budget without even. But I mean, it was worth doing, obviously. Tallulah, what about yourself?
I remember my aunt's an interior designer, and I remember her saying to me years ago, if you ever get a quote from a builder, double it and make sure you can afford double before you accept the quote. And I kind of feel like that's quite a good thing to have in mind with producing in general. With Coexisting, we did it, our budget was £1,000 or preferably under. So Omar and I each had 500 we were able to part with at that time. And we were incredibly fortunate that various people in the crew did it for, crazy low pay, because they were so talented and so great and deserved a lot better, but they loved the script and they were happy to get involved. So we were really fortunate. Having been an actor who has done my fair share of unpaid work, I kind of resent the fact that actors hardly ever get paid for short films, whereas crew do. And I totally get why. And that's normally because crew bring their own equipment. So you're kind of paying for that as well. But I was kind of adamant we have to pay our actors. That was kind of a non-negotiable thing for me, particularly because a lot of the actors we got in are kind of ones who are great actors who wouldn't normally kind of necessarily do this kind of stuff, who were doing off a favour or whatever. But I was very adamant we had to pay our actors, which Omar reluctantly kind of said was okay, but he wasn't that thrilled about it. I like you said, I think it's really important to factor in post and festivals and stuff like that, depending on what it is you're trying to get out of making your project. When I said earlier about being pragmatic rather than just doing passion stuff, there are two films I'm working on producing at the moment. One of them I absolutely love and I'm desperate to do it, but I just know the cheapest I reckon I can do it for, the absolute cheapest, is £15,000. And I know that's nothing compared to most indie films and stuff, but for me that's like a huge fortune. And I just don't think it's feasible to even raise that amount right now. I've never done Kickstarter before, and it is something I'm going to do for my next project, not the big one, but the other one. But I'm also very, very aware of the cost of living crisis. I mean, I just don't know, outside of kind of friends or family or friends of the crew, or, you know, I don't really know who would be prepared to kind of put money into these kinds of projects at the moment. And also, I think there's a limit on how many times you can kind of ask mates and family to donate to projects. So I'm very mindful of that. So that's why the first film I'm going to do next is one that I like the script. It's a great script, but I'm not passionate about it. It's just one I believe I can do with a decent budget and still make it look good, and hopefully still get it into some festivals and stuff. And hopefully the more I do that kind of thing, then the more kudos I've hopefully got in the future to say, look, I've done these films, I've been in these festivals, so now will you help me get more money to do my next one? So that's kind of my plan. But yeah, I tend to realistically write down the maximum budget, and then before I start filming something, I want to make sure that there's like a little backup cash just in case. But I always try to go under wherever possible, because you know it's going to mount up somewhere along the line.
Yeah, it's amazing where suddenly costs just come from. I mean, Kickstarter's a weird beast. It's full-time job just trying to deal with it, but also a lot of it does come from, you know, especially with it's one of your first times, like family and friends, and then where's the interest for other people? Where's the impetus for other people to? And when it's successful, amazing. It's just finding the right knack. Now, you all come from different areas. Some of you are writers and directors as well as producers. Where do you find your scripts? What do you look for when you're looking for a script, or what is it about a specific script that you either want to write or be a part of, or to put that, in the case of Angus, to put Praymaker's money behind? What is it that inspires you to go, okay, that's the project, that's the script I want to work on? Whoever wants to take that.
I can start. I think with Blue, we wrote the script, so it wasn't like a script came along and we found it. We wrote the script and we wanted to do some good. I think we didn't want it to just be entertainment. We wanted it really to resonate and be inspirational. One of the things that we've realized in the United States is just how underrepresented kind of females are in STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, and especially kind of African American girls. There's just no role models. There's just no one in there, up there that basically is that you can aspire to. So here I am, kind of a white South African male, going, well, let's do some good. Let's try and create a story that resonates and represents a character, and hopefully this will strike a chord in some young person, and maybe make them choose a path that they would never have chosen before. So for me, it was really just wanting to, if we're going to invest in something, let's hope that it changes the world for better, even if it's just a little bit, if we can actually just make the world a slightly better place. Because, I mainly work in advertising, and advertising doesn't make the world a better place. It really doesn't. So when you spend your own money on something, you really hope that it's going to make a difference, and really hope that it's actually going to just help.
I, for one, would like to believe that Coca-Cola and Ford are just looking out for the people. That's really, that's my. Anybody else? Where does where does the spark come for whatever script you choose, or that inspires you?
I think for me personally, it's like similar reasons to what Angus was saying. But yeah, like you kind of like, I'm looking for stories that ultimately will move people or progress conversations in a positive way. I'm particularly interested in keeping my slate of projects really local at the moment, so mostly set around in a city of Melbourne or in the other outer suburbs as well, but just like kind of keeping it very homegrown and looking into microcosm kind of communities. Like those sort of stories interest me, that things that particularly in Australia we haven't seen on screen a great deal of. But yeah, when assessing a script, I just want to say something funny. Actually, I was in this I was at this kind of producer conference up in Australia, and the big streamers like Prime and Netflix, they're all looking for something that's undeniable. That's kind of the buzzword at the moment. So I mean, I'm not saying I'm looking for undeniable scripts. But you kind of are looking for something that kind of pops off the page and is quite unique, and you're like, okay, I haven't heard that voice before. I haven't seen that voice represented on screen. They're the kind of things I'm looking for when I'm kind of trawling through scripts.
And Tallulah or Tom, have you got anything to add?
For me, I was interested earlier to hear Tom say actually that he found When the Clapping Stops on through Mandy, because for me, the scripts that I've been fortunate enough to work on have normally been through people I already know or through a friend of a friend, because I kind of wasn't really sure where one goes about finding new scripts. So I'm really interested to hear that he found that on Mandy. But for me, what do I look for in a script? It has to resonate with me in some way in order for me to think that it might resonate with an audience. And for me, whilst I actually quite enjoy watching satire and like political scripts and stuff like that, I've got no desire to make anything like that, because I sometimes think people want a bit of escapism. But equally, I do think if you have got a message that you feel strongly about or passionately about and you want to share it, or you want to kind of affect some kind of positive change in some way, then that's fantastic. And I think one way to do that is ideally to have a script that's got good characters, whether they're sci-fi characters or real people, and to just humanize them, to make it human and give it heart, and then hope it will resonate. There's a film, I think it was on Netflix a while ago, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong probably. I think it was called Oakjar or something, and it was about this big animal that was made so that people could like care about the climate while still eating meat, basically, was the kind of thing. But they do the film in such a way that you end up falling in love with the animal, because the woman who looks after it has a relationship with it like most people do with their dogs. Anyway, sorry, I'm babbling. But the point, after this film, loads and loads of people went vegetarian, just because it was a very simple thing, but it wasn't preachy. It wasn't like you've got to stop eating meat, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't anything like that. It was just this story of this girl and her animal pet that she loved. But they really humanized it. And I think for me, that's what I look for in scripts.
Fantastic. And Tom, finally, yourself.
Yeah, I think I've always gone towards projects that look at hidden people a lot of the time. So people who aren't necessarily in the limelight, they're kind of underlooked, like just the people who sort of meld into the background. I've always just been fascinated about like their sort of stories. So like when the clapping stops, when I found it on Mandy, I remember, because like the thing about finding work for Mandy, it's just a constant scroll of project, and something does have to stand out for you to stop and go, oh wow, that looks really good. And with when the clapping stops, it was just a story. It just really felt like a story that it was about one of those people, like a forgotten person, and it was something that was very relevant at the time. And for me, it sort of ticked all the boxes. It was something about it was something quite emotional, which I tend to go towards more emotional stuff, and it was about like an unsung hero, basically, who sort of goes under the radar, which I always really like. And also, I think I do tend to go for projects that personally I would enjoy. So they're my kind of films. They're films that I would sit down and watch, or like I would pick out on the Netflix screen, because I've done it before when I was a bit younger, where I just produced anything that came over because I just wanted the experience, helping out a mate or doing a student project. And what I realized is that, if you don't truly believe in the project that you're making, it just becomes very, very difficult and very, I wouldn't say soul crushing, but soul sapping. It kind of takes a lot of energy out of you to put in that amount of effort. So it's got to be something that, you really like believe in, and also that you would actually sit down and put on yourself, and then you can give your full energy and love towards it.
I think that's a very good bit of advice, which is, producing takes up, you are in charge of budgets, you're in charge of making sure that this comes to completion. If you don't have a passion behind it, how do you have that impetus? How do you have the amount of energy and effort it takes to make sure that everybody else around you, they need to have that passion passed on to them, so that they're willing to do the work that you're delegating to them as well. Folks, as I told you before, an hour goes just like that. There's questions we didn't get to from the audience. There's another A4 worth of questions that I have not got through either. I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of this. If you want to stick around, I'll talk to you in the green room afterwards. But as always, what I like to do is to show the audience the same clips we played at the beginning, but this time they've had an hour to get to know you and to, equate the work they're about to see to who they've just spoken to. Thank you once again for being a part of the Q&A. I'll speak to you momentarily.
Granddad! Granddad!
Hey. Oh, Beck? Is it?
No, Sandra.
Oh.
For the armchair?
Oh, right. Damien! Babe? That Beck lady's here for the armchair?
Sandra.
Oh. Sorry, Sandra. Right. This is the, Sandra for the armchair.
Babe, not my chair.
We've already talked about this. There's not going to be any room.
Babe, you know it's these items that make you attracted to me. I think it's just your way of slowly erasing me from your life.
Okay, just get the fucking armchair. Can you?
She's yelling at me.
I like your dynamic.
What, yelling at each other?
Borderline abusive.
Yeah, it seems really fun.
Okay, well, send your energy out into the world and you'll get it. Hi, you must be Sam, the new flatmate.
Oh, you must be Sandra, the lesbian?
I am. That's not what I said.
That is literally what you said. You said my lesbian housemate Sandra is moving in with the girlfriend that she barely knows.
I do know her.
Well, you might want to tell her that.
how quickly those Q&As just finish before you know what time it is. Thank you so much for joining us for another of our roundtable sessions of this year. If you're a filmmaker yourself and you've got a series or film that you're just dying to show us, head on over to londonwebfest.co.uk and you can find out all the details. We'll be back for our Q3 quarter in just a few months' time with another roundtable. But until next time, thank you so much again for joining us and happy filmmaking.